All right. We should be live. So thanks everyone for joining me here today. And I speak with accountants literally every single day. And one of their biggest challenges that I've been hearing over the past few years, and one that continues to grow, is the topic of finding staff. Staffing is without a doubt the biggest pain point, and that's something that I want to talk about today. What are some solutions to your staffing issue? But first, if you can relate to this, let me know in the comments. Is staffing something that has been challenging you at your firm? Or if not, what are you working on? Let us know in the comments. So today, that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking specifically about how you can build an offshore team, if it's right for you, what's the best way to go about doing so, and so much more. And I'm so excited to bring with you an amazing guest. Today, I have Jordan Sublett with me. He is a CPA, and he's also the CEO of Cloud Accountant Staffing, as well as a former accounting firm owner. And today, now he's on a mission to help firm owners build the firm of their dreams and grow their teams using talented offshore staff in the Philippines. So I've compiled a list of some of the most common questions I hear related to building an offshore team. But as you are watching this live, and if you have questions, feel free to leave your questions in the comments, and then I'll make sure that Jordan answers them. Or if you are joining on the replay, I can also make sure that Jordan gets you answers to those questions. So with that, Jordan, welcome. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you so much, Katie, for the introduction, and I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I met Jordan, for everyone listening. We met earlier this year. Thanks to Michael Lee, he put together an event in Scottsdale and just had a bunch of CPAs and accountants. He had us all come together and we hung out for a few days, got to strategize on what's going on in the profession. And I was so impressed with what Jordan was doing with his company. And so he offers so much insight. And like I said, I'm really excited to have you here. So, Jordan, do you want to tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into your current role at your new company?
Yes, shout out to Michael Lee and the Scottville crew too. That was a great time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so pretty standard public accounting background, at least in the beginning. So I worked at a pretty big firm, a top 100 firm in Indianapolis, and I started in what was called our entrepreneurial services group. And what that means is I got a lot of exposure to small to mid-sized companies, and I wasn't pigeonholed into, hey, you're a tax staff or audit staff. So my role was I would do financial statement reviews or audits, compilations, and then I would also do the corporate tax return for that client, and then I would do the shareholders' personal tax return. So I kind of got exposure to a little bit of everything, and more specifically to like small to mid-sized companies compared to like working at a big firm and working on like huge companies. So that experience kind of gave me the confidence to then go out on my own. So um, I got an SBA loan and bought a really small firm in a small town from a guy who was retiring, kind of like the typical legacy small accounting firm that a lot of people might be picturing. And then from there, like really tried to, like I started consuming a lot of like modern or cloud accounting type of content and tried to build like that type of firm. So, and what that meant for me was putting a lot of different cloud technology in place, building an offshore team. And I grew that firm to about 15 people, of which 10 of those people ended up being in the Philippines. Um, and then that was over the course of 3 years. And I sold my firm in January of 2023. And the reason for that is because at the beginning of 2022, that's when I really formally started my staffing company and like really decided that this is where I want to dedicate my effort and energy. As like throughout 2022, the staffing company really started growing quickly. and now I have that and my firm. So decided to sell my firm at the very beginning of this year and shift my focus to staffing, and that's what I'm doing now. And we're working with probably I think just under 35 firms right now. And across those firms, we have close to about 60 staff.
Wow.
So, and it feels like, and I think like a lot of entrepreneurs feel this way, but like, it feels like we're about to like really kind of explode here in the next few months or as we end the year here.
That's super exciting. So with those 30 firms, did you notice they were at a certain like point in their business journey when it made sense for them to bring on an offshore team, or like what pains were they experiencing specifically?
Yeah, some of them. I think it's important to identify too that, we work with some really small firms, firms that are a team of 5. And then we've recently started working with firms that have a headcount of 60 or even 80. So, but kind of our bread and butter is like a 10-person firm that's probably around $1 million in annual revenue. And I think it depends on like what services you offer, and just like what the team looks like, and are you set up properly to have a remote team, and more specifically a remote team that's all the way across the globe. But it's like really like you asked, is there like a specific time when someone's ready? Like I'm kind of joking when I say this, but like it's serious too. It's when you can't find people domestically, because that's everyone's biggest problem right now. So, right, we need, like, this is professional services and we need people to do the work. And like, it's firm owners having a really hard time finding people domestically.
So whenever someone recognizes, okay, I need help with my staffing, do they typically hire for some of those entry level roles first, or are they like, hey, I can hire, my senior or my manager offshore as well?
It's typically entry level, but we do see some of that, and we find those people to it more at that manager level. It's more competitive, and those people are harder to find, just like it would be if you were hiring here domestically. But yeah, mostly at the entry level. Now, one thing that I've seen work pretty well, because one of the main reasons to do this is also the cost savings, right? So people will still bring in people who have experience or even a CPA designation in the Philippines. So someone who might be at kind of a senior level, and then bring them into still like a bookkeeping role, but give them like enough to keep them satisfied and hungry and knowing that they can develop. But putting like potentially overqualified people into these positions, and now like being really satisfied with the work quality and knowing that these are the kinds of people too who can kind of quarterback these, a bookkeeping engagement or month-end close or whatever the engagement is that the firm has with their client. So,
That's awesome.
and yeah, so at my accounting firm, I actually showed someone this earlier. Before I sold my firm, I went back to our like meet the team page, right? And I showed him that all 10 of our staff that we had on there, with the exception to our VA, they all had CPA designations, and they were still like, that doesn't mean that, some people think that means, hey, they're going to do tax returns, or they did a lot. They just were like our staff for our CAS practice. So they were doing bookkeeping, financial statements, invoicing, payroll, just kind of all things outsourced accounting.
Got it. And so someone really, they can just being able to like shift that workload to someone overseas, keep the workflow going and continuing overnight. That in itself is also a huge benefit. So do you want to talk about like what it's like working with a team and having that communication on different time zones?
Yeah. So something you just mentioned, having like, because some people bring that up all the time. It's like, hey, when I sleep, they work. Typically, like, again, I mentioned we work with a lot of small firms, and quite frankly, like, they don't have the infrastructure for that. Like, you have to have like training, like you have to have good training, good onboarding, really good systems in place, documentation, standardized procedures. And you should have all those things anyway. But they work while I sleep model, we haven't seen that work very well, at least from the beginning. We always caution firm owners I'm on Eastern Standard Time. There's a 12-hour time difference in the Philippines. So it is, if they're going to work aligned with my shift, it's a graveyard shift, which look, it's, that's not a great quality of life. But when we screen candidates and onboard them to CAS, they tell us what shifts they're willing to work. So then when I talk to a firm owner, now when I start putting candidate profiles in front of you, I'm only going to put profiles in front of you as someone who's working on your shift. So they'll be aligned with you. If 6 months from now, this person's a rock star and they know like they got a handle on the client relationships they're managing, they know how to do all the work. Like if this is someone you really trust, then maybe you move to a more flexible of like, hey, you can work 1 hour night shift and then to align with us for some kind of feedback and communication in real time. And then work the rest of your shift on the day shift. Because now we're checking the box of, hey, they have a day shift. So they're like, that's a good retention tool. And these jobs, these are highly sought after jobs because they pay a premium, right? So that's another reason they're willing to work some of these night shifts. So if you can get to a point where now you have people who are paid this premium and you're awarding them a day shift, then that's like a really good formula for long-term retention for your team.
So just to recap, your recommendation is you bring them on, they work your shift. As you grow together, you trust them, they understand how you work. Maybe you gradually slide them to work more on their time zone with some overlap.
Yeah. And because again, we really caution. So some people want to do it right away, which I don't blame them. They want to be flexible and like they want their firm to be an awesome place to work. But we really caution them because we've seen it now over the past couple of years where if someone has that flexibility right away, like we've seen the success rate of those engagements just drops significantly. Just because, if someone gets stuck and they don't know what to do, they send you an email or a Slack message and you're asleep, then you wake up and you reply to it and they're asleep. And again, unless you don't have like bigger firms that have like real infrastructure and maybe they have like a supervisor over there on that shift, then it can work. But otherwise it can be tricky for small firms.
That makes sense. And so do you, whenever a new firm engages with you to help them build their offshore team, do you talk them through like how to even maintain that communication with your offshore team? Because a lot of us are working remotely now, but for some of us, even the idea of remote work is a bit newer.
Yeah, so we have a best practices checklist that we provide. But depending on kind of the timeline of where we're at, sometimes it's right after I have a discovery call, but like when we're having that discovery call, we try to determine, is this firm owner going to be a good fit for this? And like part of that is finding out like, hey, do you have Slack? Do you have Teams? Like, do you have the ability for like real-time communication with someone who's not sitting in the office next to you? If you don't, and then you also, everything's QuickBooks desktop or like there's no cloud-based applications, you're probably not a great fit. So we just try to make sure people have like the right technology in place at their firm for this to be successful.
Yeah, the technology, I'm sure, plays a major factor in enabling it to be a successful relationship.
Yeah, and one of the reasons too, this is like growing so quickly. Like the pandemic, of course, like really accelerated the timeline here of like small companies' willingness to work remote with their teams. It advanced the technology too, right? Like Zoom and Slack and things like that. So like now, the big firms, they've been doing this forever. But now is the time that small firms can really do this without some of the challenges that they used to face.
Absolutely. So Jordan, I have to ask, like, what's that engagement look like? Do these staff work for multiple firms? Are they with just your firm? What does that look like?
Yeah, great question. So there's different models of staffing companies or BPOs, right? Like some of these models, like firm owners, they just want to punt the work overseas, and there's a team of people, and that team, serves 10 different firms, and you never really know who's doing the work this time, who did it last time, who's getting my review notes, and there's really no accountability. For us, like, I'll take you through the process too of what it looks like working with us and hiring someone, but you get a fully dedicated team member that works just for you. We verify that they're resigning from a current position. We get them to sign an agreement saying that they're not going to be freelancing on the side. So yeah, like, our goal is long-term engagements with, with someone who's fully dedicated to your team.
That's awesome, and probably creates for like a lot better working relationship long-term for that person. They truly get to know who they're working with and can actually become a part of the team, truly.
Yeah. Yep.
So then, of course, a common question that comes up is like, how do you go about communicating this with your clients? Like, do you need to communicate it? What's that look like?
Yeah. So I always tell people to be transparent with their clients. And also, there's, if you're having people do tax prep, the IRS does too. And there's very strict compliance. It's called Regulation 7216. So if you're going to have someone do tax prep, we could go a long time on that, but you have to follow the compliance there, which requires signed consent letters from your clients. And the consent letters too they're written for you by the IRS, and you can't like bury it in your engagement letter. So if someone's going to be preparing, especially individual tax returns, then like, you have to follow the rules. With bookkeeping, there's much less compliance. You can best practice still. You want to put something in your engagement letter that says you're doing this. And I always communicated it with my clients. And what I realized is, for the most part, clients don't care. Like, they want the work to get done. They want to get it done correctly. They want to know too that, if this is my firm, that at the end of the day, I'm still responsible for the work product that's coming out of my firm, and that it's secure. So as long as you're kind of checking the box on those things, for the most part, like, clients don't push back at this. And I've had this conversation with firm owners that we're working with now a lot too, and I'm hearing the same thing from them. Like, once they actually like get this done, they realize that their clients didn't have an issue with it.
Yeah, especially if you're maintaining good work quality, like you said, that's what they really want.
Yeah, and you can tell, like, you can talk to them too just about the labor shortage here domestically, and that you can't find any people to do the job.
Right. And it probably frees you up then too to communicate with them more, which ultimately that's what they want. Good quality work, more communication from you, timely communication. So
Yeah, it will. And in line with that question too, some firm owners ask, like, not only, hey, how do I communicate this to my clients? How do I tell my current staff too that we're going to start using an offshore team? And what I'll see often there is, just that, hey, we're bringing some people on from the Philippines, and this is going to free you up to do like more of the client, like really wrap your, like, be the client's quarterback, and like get you out of some of the transactional level work. So that's one way to present this to your team too.
and that's the more meaningful work that they want to do likely anyway. So a big
Exactly.
win. So then I think it'd be really helpful, Jordan, if you could walk us through like, okay, I realize like I need to hire an offshore team. Like, what does that process look like? And even like if you could kind of give like timelines of building this team, that'd be super helpful.
Yeah. So it usually starts with, a Zoom call just like this, and someone's asked, like, I ask my questions and try to determine like the profile of the firm and the profile of the type of a person they're looking for, excuse me. And then it's like the very obvious, like, value add is the sourcing and recruiting of the talent, right? We go find people, but after we have a discovery call, I'll usually send some more info, I'll send client references so you can talk to other firm owners about what it's like working with us. But then I'll send you candidate profiles that I think are people that might align with what you're looking for. I usually send like three of those profiles at a time, and that includes a resume, a Loom video of them talking about themselves, so you get to listen to them and they're talking about themselves, so maybe you get a feel if you think they'd be a good fit culturally for your firm, and then what that person's monthly rate is. And then you would say, hey, Jordan, I really like Rachel. Let's set up an interview. We'd set up a Zoom interview, me, you, and Rachel. Um, and that happens usually pretty quick too, Katie, because we're actively recruiting. So we normally have people in the pipeline that fit most of the roles that firm owners are looking for. So then we do an interview, and of course it's mutual. So an offer gets made from the firm and the person accepts. It's customary in the Philippines to give 30 days notice. So usually, just in the name of managing expectations, I tell people expect at least a month after we have that interview before this person's starting at your firm.
Gotcha. Is that 30 days notice? Then would they as well, like let's say you're working with someone and they maybe decide that they want to go down a different career path, are they typically going to give you 30 days notice?
Yeah. So you mean when we have turnover with our
Yeah.
staff that are placed at other firms? Yeah. And they agree to it in their employment contracts. And almost all the time they do. It's happened where someone's kind of abruptly left before. But some of the same things that are out of our control domestically, like it can happen here too, right? It's not exclusive to an offshore problem. If someone's going to kind of break their word and not give you their notice, then you just have to deal with it. But for the most part, they give the 30 days notice.
Gotcha. Hey, that's better than 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's right. And usually when that happens too, like whether it's someone, leaving to move on to another opportunity, or even if a firm decides to terminate like a relationship with the staff, like ultimately we still want to work with the firm. So we're our best interest. Like we're looking for another person to place at their firm that'll be a good long-term fit for them.
Yeah, you're still in their back corner, rooting for them and helping them grow their team.
Yep.
So then, is it like, let's say I'm like, okay, I need to fill 5 positions. Are you typically going to hire in a tiered approach where you bring on like 1 and then 2, or do you have people come in and they start with a team of 5? What's that look like?
It can depend. So that happened this week. Someone had a sales call with someone and said, hey, we want 5 people. And so we sent them 10 profiles to sort through and pick who they would like to set up interviews with. But they're a 60-person firm. So they likely have the infrastructure to, like, they might stagger it a little bit, but they could probably bring all these people on over the course of like 6 weeks. So it depends. If it's a really small firm, then it's probably going to take longer. We probably get one person integrated, then whenever they feel ready to start it again. Because again, like the heavy lifting, like our heavy lifting is mostly done during the interviewing and then onboarding, or like the very beginning, first day onboarding. But then it kind of becomes the firm owner's responsibility, right, to integrate them into the firm, assign work to them, make sure they understand like how they work. So it just depends on the size of the firm.
That makes sense. So as you've helped firms build their offshore teams, have you noticed that they're like common mistakes or things to watch out for when doing so?
Yeah. So one thing, and I think I mentioned this earlier, is even though like from a compliance standpoint and technically speaking, this person isn't your employee, like if you want this to work long term, then culturally speaking, you need to treat this person like a full-time employee of the team. So like if it turns into very much like a contractor type relationship, then it's not going to work long term. Like this person should, if you have a weekly staff meeting with the team, this person needs to be in the weekly staff meeting. If you have, quarterly check-ins and performance evaluations, your offshore staff needs to be included in that. So that's kind of a common mistake we see, is sometimes people will treat this as if this person's, a contractor, when really it needs to be treated as if they're a full-time team member. The other one we kind of talked about too is just the shifts, right? Like know when the right time is to give someone the flexibility to work a day shift.
And you mentioned like there's, you should be working with them for likely a set amount of time. Have you found there's like a sweet spot, like, hey, let's build out your schedule so eventually, you are getting to that 1 hour and a little bit better quality of life? Is it like kind of a scheduled approach, or is it just go by your gut feeling?
Yeah, well, so we typically see if someone, like if there's a really talented person who's really responsible and on top of their communication, it can happen as soon as 6 months. Anything before that, we think is probably too soon. And then like we see it often at the 1 year mark. But again, like you do have to give someone that time to understand your workflow and understand the clients they're managing and the work product before they're able to have that flexibility.
Yeah, and create a better experience them too for not just your firm, but for them as well, because it takes some time to get integrated, learn your processes, your software,
Yeah.
everything.
Well, you also like once you do that, like yes, now this person's happy they have a day shift, but now it becomes difficult to like integrate them culturally again, right? Because now they're working at a different time than you, so you still have to find ways to bring them into that weekly staff meeting. One thing we're seeing too that helps build that camaraderie is like we have a client here in Indy that they're like a 40-person firm and they have 3 staff with us. They're bringing them all to Indianapolis for their like off-site retreat that they do, and we have we have other clients that have done that, and we have clients that go to the Philippines and hang out with their team for a couple days. So things like that, anything you can do like that is going to help you like build a long-term team.
Yeah, like actually make them a part of your team.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then one other thing that I hear come up a lot is like what what are kind of your average cost savings from building an outsourced team?
Yeah. It's usually 50+%. Um, and it can be even better if you're on the West Coast. And also it kind of depends on the position you're looking to hire. As sometimes there's real value in like those higher level, like a senior candidate or a manager that you find. It tends to the savings can be even more significant. But like so, kind of our like for reference, kind of transactional level bookkeeping type people who are reconciling bank accounts and credit cards, but they're probably not like doing a month end close or don't have a great grasp of like your financial statements, the balance sheet and P&L. Someone like that, it's probably about $2,000 a month for full time, 40 hours a week. And then we place on the tax side's gotten even more competitive. So if we have someone who's, let's say, has a CPA designation and 6 years doing U.S. tax prep, that person can cost like almost $4,000 a month. Now here, like let's just use Indy. That's where I'm at. Like 6 years U.S. tax, CPA, like that's a tax senior and bordering like supervisor or manager level. That person's going to be around $100,000 a year, and
Yeah.
in California, it's going to be even more than that.
So those are huge savings.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, well, I think that this is all amazing information. So before we take some questions, Jordan, where can people find you, learn more about you, and talk to you if they want to, help building their offshore team?
Yeah, cloudaccountantsstaffing.com. My email is jordan@cloudaccountantsstaffing.com. Otherwise, I need to do better at creating more content, Katie. But yeah, just go to the website.
Perfect. So we've got a lot of questions around technology
Okay.
and just maybe if you could share a little bit more about like your recommended tech stack to make it successful when working offshore.
Yeah, so you have to have like you really need to have task management software. So some of the ones, and people probably aware of these, but like Carbon, Canopy, Jetpack Workflow, like those are very like industry specific for accounting firms, and they're great. They're cloud based. They have client portals. They have ways to communicate internally with your team, and they have really good task management. But like one thing we did at my firm too is so for every like if we brought on a new client that wanted bookkeeping, we of course had a bookkeeping job template, and there was probably 10 steps with a lot of detail. And then we would hyperlink videos to those steps using loan. So for instance, if step one was, here's how you reconcile the bank account, then there was a 1 to 2 minute video linked to it. So now when we onboard staff, like I don't have to show, no one on my team has to show anyone that, every time we bring someone on. And there doesn't have to be a refresher. Here's the video of us doing it with a screen share of us doing it in QuickBooks Online. So highly recommend a task management software. And then have Slack or have Teams so you can do video conferencing and so you can have real-time chat communication rather than, nobody wants a million emails. So
Right.
I think if you have those two things, and then of course, QuickBooks Online or Xero for the accounting systems. And if you're a tax firm, I like ProConnect Tax Online, which is an Intuit product, but it's not for big, robust firms that have really complicated tax returns, but it's a really slick cloud-based software that's great for remote teams.
Yeah, great text suggestions. How about another question we got was about days off and like managing maybe like that cultural difference of like holidays. How do you balance that with the firms and maybe it doesn't line up with here? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, so from day one, usually again after that discovery call, when I send you, client references and more information, I send the holiday calendar too, because from a compliance standpoint, we have to honor those holidays. Now, there's some that we have like holiday swapping so that they can align with some of the U.S. holidays. So we try to be flexible, but at the same time, if our staff want to take those holidays, then they get those holidays. And then for PTO too, we offer 15 days PTO. It gets accrued as they've worked more, like as the duration at your firm increases, they earn those days of PTO.
Got it. Okay, makes sense. I think, okay, yeah, lots of like software questions. So I think your suggestions were great. Anything else, Jordan, that you think would be important for people to know about building an offshore team that we didn't talk about?
Gosh, just work with, even if it's not us, work with someone like us. Like don't just go on LinkedIn and go start sending people messages in the Philippines, or you're going to do this the wrong way. So even if it's not us, work with somebody like us that knows how to do this and can help you build your team right.
I think that's great advice. So thanks everyone so much for joining Jordan and myself today. If you have questions, make sure you reach out to Jordan, or if you reach out to me and need to get put in touch with Jordan, I can help make that introduction. So thank you, Jordan, for coming on. And I appreciate you answering all of these questions, providing so much good information, and really giving people the insight that they need to start confidently down their journey of building their offshore team.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was my pleasure.
Awesome. We'll catch you guys later. Bye.